Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet.
This review covers the Laird Super Solution Air Racer. It's a 1/32nd scale kit from the Williams brothers, and it's number 0050-32510 in their catalog. It's a skill level 2 kit with about 40 pieces molded in gray and a clear canopy and water slide decals. Now, the Great Depression saw an unprecedented drop in wealth worldwide, but it also saw the birth of the golden age of air racing. And in August of '31, just 5 days before the Bendix race, the Super Solution rolled out of the Laird factory with the Viridian green fuselage and Kodak yellow wings. Now, Jimmy Doolittle was the first to test fly the plane, and he noted that it was controllable but was difficult to land. Later, the Super Solution had to drop out of the race series in the Thompson Trophy race because of engine trouble. Now, this kit can be built pretty easily and looks great at a relatively moderate skill level. Here are the kit's contents on 3 sprue trees and the clear canopy, and we'll be using mostly liquid cement, sometimes super glue for strength, and some clear or white glue for the canopy part. Now, the decals are very colorful and the register is good, but you may need to use some setting solutions. And remember to use the safety precautions when using any of the products that you see or hear used in the review by the manufacturer themselves. Construction starts with the engine, so remove the components that we'll need for that from the tree and clean them up. Make sure that you remove any of the flash or any sprue marks that are still attached. Use some liquid cement and glue the front and back half of the engine together. The prop has some sink marks that you can see here. They're pretty pronounced, and of course also some parting lines, but we're going to want to fill those sink marks. I use some Squadron Products putty to fill those in and smooth them over so that it's like it never happened. Next, after I cleaned up the cylinders, was to spray them with some flat black paint. I sprayed the crankcase area with some neutral gray paint too. You can see the sink marks that were filled in on the prop here that were finished off with some 800 grit paper and finally a 1200 finish grit. And the prop was actually a polished aluminum. So to do this, I used some Alclad chrome paints. The first coat is a coat of Alclad gloss black as a base coat. While that was drying, I painted the push rod tubes with some flat black paint by hand. Then I glued some of the cylinders, all 9 of them, to the crankcase using some liquid cement. I used a little drop of glue to attach the exhaust stacks to a piece of styrene strip because they're so small, and then I painted those with some steel color and the ends of the pipes with a little bit of flat black. Then you can attach the exhaust stacks to the engine with some super glue, making sure that they point away from the radial engine. Use some thin cement and go ahead and glue the cowl halves together and make sure that the edges all match. There's an attachment points where the cowl halves go together, and they need to be cleaned up and filled with your favorite putty. I used some Squadron and then sanded and primed with a little Tamiya gray primer. So go ahead and remove the cockpit components from the tree now, as well as the glass cockpit. And we're also going to gather up the parts for the airframe, fuselage, and work with those next. The interior around the cockpit area was bare aluminum, and so I started by painting the entire thing with some of the Alclad gloss black base. Because of the contrast, it's difficult to see, but I had begun now to apply some of the aluminum, the chrome color, to the interior and the cockpit pieces in very light coats. It's important that you just do light coats to get the good shine out of the Alclad paints. Once the interior parts have dried, go ahead and match the fuselage halves together and then gluing them in place with some liquid cement. And I use some small clamps to keep them in position until the glue dried. As you can see here, the dreaded fuselage half seams have shown up once you do that, and so I began to fill those with some putty, sanded them down with some 800 grit sandpaper after that had dried to start smoothing them out. Assemble the cockpit using some super glue, and then apply those to the interior of the plane along with the instrument panel decal. I used some of the micro crystal clear glue to glue the canopy onto the fuselage, and then I masked that with some Tamiya tape. Follow this up with some nice even coats of the light gray primer. Glue the horizontal stabilizers onto the fuselage using some liquid cement and verify symmetry between the two sides. While the airframe is drying, we can move to the undercarriage components. So remove those from the sprue tree and clean them up. Apply some liquid cement to the edges and glue the tire and wheel halves together. To simulate the weight of the aircraft, I flattened out the tires by heating a flat metal plate and melting the plastic slightly on one edge. Paint the tire surfaces with some Testors enamel rubber paint. Next, you can go ahead and paint the interior of the wheels with some aluminum. Now place the tires and wheels between the wheel pant halves and then apply some liquid cement to the wheel pant edges and set that aside to dry with a clamp to keep it in position. Mask off the tires and then apply some putty to the seams and the low spots. Sand it with some 400 grit sandpaper after it dries, and then prime the units with some gray primer. Now grab those wings and we're going to paint those with some of the Kodak yellow. It comes from Testors, and this is just the 1114 spray paint. Now we can mask off the areas that will remain yellow on the fuselage and the wing root there with some Tamiya tape and some blue painter's tape to mask it off. Next, we'll paint the fuselage, cowl, landing gear, and struts with some of the green paint. It's a Testors 1124. After the paint has dried to the touch, remove the masking from the fuselage. Paint the rest of the parts with the same green and allow them to dry. And you'll see that your model is coming together pretty quickly here. With the main airframe all painted, it's starting to look like an airplane now. Test fit the lower wing and glue it into place using some thick super glue. Once the wing has dried, turn the unit over and glue the landing gear to the fuselage, again using some thick super glue. Scraping the paint where the glue's contact points are, now you can glue the upper wing into position. Make sure that the upper wing is on the same horizontal plane as the lower. I used some of the micro crystal clear product here to glue the wing struts between the upper and the lower wings. Test fit the engine into the fuselage, clear any paint from where they go together, and use some super glue to mount the engine into the frame. The fit with the cowl over the cylinders was a little tight, so I needed to sand them down to allow the cowl to move over the engine. I just used a flat sand stick of 400 grit sandpaper and sanded off just enough to slide the cowl onto the engine. When it was halfway on, I used a little micro crystal clear to glue the cowl onto the engine too. Time to get the decals out, and I'm building the version that was the early one that Doolittle flew as a test pilot. And you're going to want to use plenty of warm water. Make sure that you put it on the surface to allow these decals to slide into place before you smooth them out with a damp cloth or Kleenex and get out any water or air bubbles underneath. Then you can use some of the sudding solution to make sure that they conform to the contours and go into place over any features. Now we can apply the rigging to the plane. I used the smallest music wire I had on hand. Now the holes are already molded into the fuselage and wings, so start by making a slight bend on the one end of a piece of the music wire that's about the right length. This bend can go into a hole in the wing. Now place the wire into the hole in the wing and then rotate it and get it as close to the fuselage hole as possible. This will show you how long it needs to be. Cut the wire about an 1/8 inch longer than that. Now bend the end of the wire that 1/8 inch at the same angle that you did the one on the other end. Now place the wires in the holes, make sure that it's the right length. And if it's just about right, you can go ahead and put a little thick glue on each end of the wire and then snap it into place as your guide wire. Now this rigging is pretty close to scale. It might be a little large, but it's very easy to put in place. It's durable and it will always be straight. Well, there you have it. This great looking little plane with its dramatic color scheme looks great on any display shelf. And you can still get these Williams Brothers kits in the 1/32nd scale from the factory itself. They sell their stuff directly, or you'll be able to find them sometimes at online retailers and in the larger craft stores. But if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this premium scale model kit review. And so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking on the icon in the lower right hand of any of our reviews. Or you can find us on Facebook or our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.